And we are also now learning about this major offensive to retake Iraq's second largest city from ISIS control. U.S.-trained Iraqi forces, as many as 25,000 of them, prepared to launch attacks to win back the key city of Mosul in northern Iraq. So the key question now, how involved will U.S. advisors be? Let me bring in two voices. I have Lieutenant Colonel Scott Mann, retired U.S. Army Special Forces and Military Advisor for the Concerned Veterans of America, and with me here in New York, Gideon Rose, editor of Foreign Affairs and author of How Wars End. Gentlemen, welcome to both of you. And to both, the first obvious question, I want both of you to answer this. First, you, Colonel, from a military perspective. You know, on the surface, you have to wonder why give ISIS the heads up that they're coming in the springtime?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's questions on a lot of folks' minds. But one of the things that I'm not going to get too deep into questioning the ground force commanders' decisions on that. I'm sure they have reasons for that. They're probably, maybe strategic information or something like that. I mean, it's typically not what you do, that you announce that you're coming. But again, those guys on the ground, those maneuver force commanders, I'm sure they know what they're doing there. So I think probably just let that one play out and see.
How would you respond to that?
Well, it's hard to keep a secret from the press, even about our own troop movements. And when you're working with the Iraqis in a coordinated operation, I don't think this would have been secret very long, no matter what. So the question is, can you achieve tactical surprise, even if you're not going to get strategic surprise?
Colonel, can you pull this off? Is it feasible without U.S. ground troops with regard to Mosul?
Well, I think that's going to be really tough without U.S. ground troops because the Iraqi military, frankly, is pretty nascent. I mean, it hasn't been around that long. You saw what happened when we pulled out before. So I think advisors in this sense are critical. And look, advising is hard work in combat. Combat advisors play a very critical role in bolstering the strength and resolve of a host nation military like this. And you can't just sit at home and say, have a good time storming the castle. You got to be with these guys, and you got to move as they move.
And on that note, I'm also wondering if this is the U.S., if this is CENTCOM, Gideon, sort of saying to this 60-nation coalition, we want to help you, we're coming, full court press time come the spring.
I don't think it's full court press, but...
How would you characterize it?
Well, I mean, it seems like we are moving forward. Having stopped their advance, the question is, can you now push them back, and can you take Mosul?
Full court press on Mosul, no?
Full court press on Mosul, yes. It'll be interesting to see. It's a very interesting operation. People are very skeptical. The Iraqi army has not done all that well fighting outside its own home bases. This is an area that is one that went over to the rebels relatively easily, and we all hope the operation works.
Right.
If this one won't work, a future one will. And eventually, I think ISIS's future is not particularly bright. But the question of whether we can do it this spring, that would be great if possible.
I hope you're right that the future isn't bright for ISIS. And I'm looking at you, and I had pulled up a transcript. The last time we talked was in October. And listen, a lot of people agreed with you initially, thinking that, listen, the biggest surprise with ISIS, and the administration has said this before, is the momentum of the land grab. And when we were talking in October, you said something essentially to the effect of ISIS has reached a natural limit of its logical expansion. And now what we've seen with the decapitation of 21 Egyptian Christians on the shores of the Mediterranean Sea paints a very different picture of how they are moving.
So ISIS has a territorial base in Syria and Iraq. It's created a caliphate, and that's absolutely crucial to its appeal. This is not a transnational terrorist group. This is an actual attempt to instantiate a millenarian reality, to say we have the future, it is an Islamic return to the past, and it's here and now and working. That gives it a target to be attacked, and if we can keep that in, I don't think they're expanding on the ground in Syria and Iraq. The offshoots in places like Libya or in Egypt, these are, in effect, opportunistic infections of environments that are very disrupted and disordered. Right. It's not an expansion of the main ISIS territory, and in fact, we may see that main ISIS territory.
It's an expansion of the ISIS ideology.
And this becomes a very interesting question. Can the ISIS ideology and can the ISIS brand expand and thrive, even if the home base is checked and eventually crushed in?
That's an interesting point.
This is an interesting question. We don't know. And the question, the United States has to contain it while at the same time pushing it back without getting sucked in on the ground to its own war. That's the challenge.
On the notion of containment, we had scholar Aaron David Miller talking this morning on CNN about ways to stop ISIS. Colonel, I want you to listen to this.
to demonstrate that they, in fact, can't expand and that they can't deliver the kinds of services, electricity, water, good governance. We must make their caliphate fail. We have to demonstrate on the battlefield and to the extent we can in the political arena that IS has failed. That's the way to beat this.
What do you think of that, Colonel? I mean, listen, I feel like there are two different narratives of why, there are multiple narratives of why people go to join ISIS. One is the tangible, those who were there, water, salary, food, health care, and then there are those who want to subscribe to this ideology. But I'm wondering, in your perspective, if cutting off those tangible things would help stop the land grab.
Well, I think the first thing is to acknowledge that their narrative is indeed working. I mean, look at the shootings in Copenhagen where the brothers swore allegiance to ISIS. What's going on with these young girls. This narrative is resonating globally, and I think that's probably going to continue for some time. I'm a little skeptical about our ability to go in and, quote-unquote, crush the caliphate. The last 13 or 14 years of the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, this top-down approach with just working with the military, we're going to have to work with these marginalized Sunni tribes from the bottom up. They are a major factor, and if we don't work bottom up and top down, I don't see this outcome much different than what we've seen over the last few years.
I remember that was a point you were making over and over before. It's about these tribes. It's about getting in on the community level. Scott Mann, Lieutenant Colonel Scott Mann, and Gideon Rose, thank you both very, very much.